All right, welcome to the deep dive. You guys have sent us a ton of really interesting stuff lately, and this week we're going to dive into the next 5 years of AI. You know, expectations versus reality.
Yeah, yeah.
Should be a good one.
It's going to be fun. I think it's a really important conversation.
Absolutely, especially because this tech is moving so quickly. We got to kind of stay on top of it and understand, where are we now and where are we going?
Yeah. What's the reality? What's the hype? And where are those two things meeting?
Exactly. Yeah. And so, luckily, our listeners have done a great job kind of sourcing some really interesting stuff, a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah. I love the material for this one. It really runs the gamut from, how fast generative AI has been adopted, which is just mind-blowing, right? And ChatGPT hit 100 million users in just 2 months back in late 2022.
That's crazy.
It's wild. And that growth has only continued, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But, there's still a lot of limitations in natural language processing. And some really smart people are actually kind of giving us their takes on how AI is going to change things like healthcare and education and business.
Absolutely. Yeah. So today, we're going to kind of dig into all this stuff, try to make sense of it,
Yeah.
give you some key takeaways,
Distill it down.
and hopefully paint a really clear picture of what's coming. Not just like the exciting stuff, but also, some of the things we might need to be wary of or to keep in mind. So yeah, I think it's going to be a fun conversation.
Let's do it.
So, why don't we start off with, the here and now.
Okay.
We're in 2025.
Right.
And, just looking at what you shared, I mean, it's pretty clear that AI isn't some like far off thing, right? It's already everywhere.
It's everywhere. You see it, you don't see it. But the sources we have, they really drive home the point that this is a major technological force already. I mean, it's transforming so many different sectors. And, just this explosion of generative AI, right? I mean,
Yeah.
these models can write text, they can create images.
Wild.
It's changing how we're interacting with tech every day.
I mean, it's almost funny to think back to, just a couple years ago,
Yeah.
where asking an AI to write an email for you or to create an image was like this crazy futuristic idea.
It seemed impossible.
And now it's like a given, right?
It's almost commonplace. I mean, yeah, the stuff you sent really highlights just how quickly this is all happening. Like we said, ChatGPT's initial growth, that's just one small part of this bigger picture.
Absolutely. But, it's not all, sunshine and roses.
Right.
Right. There are definitely some real challenges that have come up, and I think, the sources pointed to a few of these.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing some incredible capabilities, right? We're talking generating text, producing images, sifting through massive amounts of data, even helping with decision-making.
Right.
But the research also flags some key issues like accuracy.
Right.
Can we always trust what AI produces?
Thanks.
That's something that we definitely need to consider. And then there's, the whole question of regulation. I mean, how do we govern this technology?
Yeah.
That's still very much a work in progress.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's kind of our starting point.
Right.
The here and now, 2025.
Yeah.
Now let's look ahead a little bit. What kind of big technological advances can we expect in the next 5 years, by 2030?
Okay.
Based on what you've seen in this material. And, one thing that really jumps out is natural language processing. It seems like that's going to be a huge area of focus.
It really is. The sources suggest that a lot of the development in the next 5 years is going to be about tackling the current limitations of NLP.
Yeah.
You've had that experience, right, where you ask an AI a question and the answer it gives you is, well, just not quite right.
Oh, absolutely.
Or maybe even completely made up.
Yeah.
It's like it gets the general idea, but then it goes off on some weird tangent.
Yeah, and it's funny, the articles we have, they actually talk about how these current systems can just, spit out false information.
Right.
And, make these illogical connections.
Yeah. It's like they're trying to connect dots that aren't even there.
Exactly.
But the really interesting thing is that the research anticipates some major improvements in a few key areas. So, for example, we're likely to see AI with much better factual grounding. Like, imagine systems that can actually verify information before they present it to us.
That would be huge.
It'd be game-changing.
Yeah.
And we should see improvements in context retention.
Right.
The AI that can actually follow a long conversation
Right.
or understand the nuances of, a really long document.
I've definitely had that frustration where, you're having a back and forth with an AI,
Yeah.
and it just seems to lose the thread after like 3 or 4 exchanges.
Yeah, loses the plot completely.
Yeah.
And the sources also talk about this, more nuanced understanding of language,
Mm.
being able to pick up on cultural references
Yeah. Right.
or, those kind of implied meanings that we as humans just naturally get.
Right. Right.
And this is really important. The expectation is that we'll see a big reduction in those hallucinations,
Right.
those moments where the AI just makes stuff up,
Fabricates. Yeah.
fabricates facts.
Details.
Yeah. And the research actually points to how systems like ChatGPT right now can make connections that are nonsensical and false,
Right.
like literally make up journal citations.
Yeah. It's
And that's a big problem
Yeah.
that they're working to solve.
That's reassuring. Okay, so better language comprehension, more reliable information. That paints a really, interesting picture. So what else is on the horizon? One thing that you sent me that I thought was really interesting was this idea of AI converging with other technologies. And it
Yes.
sounds like this is going to be really impactful.
This is huge. The sources really emphasize that this kind of synergistic integration,
Hmm.
it's going to be a defining trend in the next 5 years. In fact, one of the pieces you sent me has this great quote. It says that the combination of telehealth, big data, AI, and wearables, this is going to have the greatest positive impact on healthcare outcomes in the near future, even more than any one of those individual technologies could do on their own.
Wow.
It's a powerful stuff.
Yeah. I mean, so it's not just about, AI working in a silo. It's about AI amplifying the capabilities of all these other innovations.
Right. It's like they're all working together.
Yeah.
And you had some really interesting examples in your notes about how this integration might play out in different sectors.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think about like AI working with the Internet of Things.
Right.
Right. So creating like truly responsive environments. So like a smart home, even a smart city that can like adjust to our needs in real time.
Yeah. I mean, imagine a city that can like predict traffic patterns and adjust traffic lights accordingly.
That's amazing.
It's incredible. And then there's AI with XR.
Right.
So that's extended reality,
Right.
like VR and AR. And this could lead to like unbelievably immersive and intelligent experiences, whether it's gaming or professional training or remote collaboration.
Yeah, I can really see that. Like, imagine a VR training simulation that's powered by AI, so it can adapt to your performance and like the
Absolutely.
decisions you make in a really smart way.
Yeah. It's like having a personalized trainer in the virtual world.
That's wild. So what other combinations are we talking about here?
Well, there's also this potential of AI working with quantum computing.
Mm.
Now, quantum computing is still pretty early stage,
Right.
but it has this insane processing power.
Mm-hmm.
And if you combine that with AI algorithms, it could like unlock solutions to problems that we can't even solve today,
Wow.
particularly in things like drug development and material science.
Fascinating.
And finally, there's AI and robotics. This promises a whole new era of robots that can not only do tasks, but they can actually learn and adapt in like really complex environments.
So it's AI as the brain behind all these different technologies, making them smarter and more effective. That's a really compelling vision of the future. Now, another thing that the sources highlighted was autonomous systems. And, when I hear that, I immediately think of self-driving cars.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's actually much broader than that.
It's much bigger than that.
Yeah.
I mean, the next 5 years, we're going to see a big push towards systems that can make decisions on their own, solve problems without humans needing to step in all the time.
Right.
Obviously, self-driving cars are part of that, operating in more and more complex conditions, but it goes way beyond that.
So give me some concrete examples. Like what kind of things are we talking about?
Well, imagine robots that can do super complex tasks in different settings.
Mm-hmm.
Not just on a factory floor, but maybe in a hospital,
Okay.
assisting with surgery,
Right.
or even in our homes.
Okay.
The sources also talk about AI managing really intricate processes like, global logistics or energy grids. And this is key. Systems that can learn and adapt without us needing to program them for every single scenario.
Okay, so more intelligent machines that can operate more independently. That sounds like it could have a huge impact on a lot of industries.
Mm.
So let's zoom in on some of those industries. Healthcare seems to be one that's really poised for change.
Absolutely. The sources paint this picture of healthcare that's much more personalized,
Mm.
much more proactive.
Uh.
And AI is going to be a big driver of that. So, for example, we can expect AI-powered diagnostic tools
Okay.
things that can detect diseases way earlier than we can today
Right,
and with much greater accuracy.
right.
Imagine AI that can find subtle patterns in medical images or patient data that a human doctor might miss.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like this tireless, first-pass diagnostician,
Wow.
just constantly looking for those subtle signs of disease.
Right.
That could lead to much earlier intervention.
Yeah, that could be revolutionary for, treatment outcomes.
Absolutely. And you mentioned personalized treatment.
Yeah.
Well, AI can analyze a patient's unique data,
Yeah.
their genetics, their medical history, their lifestyle, all of that,
Right.
and then suggest treatments that are specifically tailored to that individual.
Wow.
That's going to dramatically increase the chances of a positive outcome. And then, remember how we talked about AI and quantum computing?
Yeah.
Well, that could really accelerate the process of drug discovery,
Okay.
make it much faster and more efficient to develop new therapies.
That's amazing. Now, one term that I saw in the material was the final mile experience.
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean in terms of healthcare?
Well, it's about making healthcare more seamless and more convenient for the patient.
Okay.
So think about things like home delivery of medications.
Mm-hmm.
AI-powered logistics can make that much more streamlined.
Right.
And then there's direct-to-consumer lab testing.
Right.
That's becoming more and more common. And AI can help analyze those results.
So it's about making healthcare more accessible, regardless of where you are.
Exactly. Wherever and whenever people need it.
That's fantastic. Now let's talk about education. It seems like there's a lot of excitement about the possibilities of AI in education,
Yeah.
but also some big questions about how to do it right.
There are.
Yeah.
The research you sent me brought up some really important points about how students are going to interact with AI.
Mm-hmm.
These tools are so easy to use
Right.
and so accessible
Right.
that it raises questions about whether students will become too reliant on them
Right.
and whether they'll still develop those really important fundamental skills.
Right. Yeah. Like if an AI can write a perfect essay for you on any topic,
Exactly.
what's the motivation to actually learn how to write yourself?
Right. I mean, why bother?
Right. Right. So what kind of changes need to happen in education to, effectively adapt to this new reality?
Well, the sources point to a few key areas. First, we're going to need new ways to assess student learning.
Mm.
Traditional tests might not cut it anymore if AI can just generate the answers.
Mm.
We need assessments that can really measure understanding and critical thinking. And then the curriculum needs to change.
Mm.
We need to teach students how to use AI tools effectively, responsibly. They need to understand the strengths and limitations of AI.
Makes sense.
And teachers need to find ways to use AI for personalized learning, right?
Yeah.
So tailoring instruction to each student's needs.
Right.
But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're still fostering those critical thinking skills,
Yeah.
problem-solving abilities.
Absolutely.
And finally, we need clear guidelines on how to use AI appropriately in an academic setting.
It sounds like education is going to have to go through a period of, real evolution.
Yeah, a major adaptation.
Yeah, to really figure out how to integrate AI thoughtfully. So what about business?
Yep.
The wider economy. How is AI expected to reshape that landscape over the next 5 years?
Well, the sources suggest that AI is going to force businesses to rethink how they operate, how they create value. It's not just about automating those repetitive tasks anymore. It's about optimizing workflows.
Okay.
And it's about augmentation.
Mm-hmm.
AI working alongside humans
Right.
to make us more efficient, more effective.
So it's more of a collaborative partnership.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And businesses are also going to use AI for better decision-making,
Okay.
using things like predictive analytics
Right.
and scenario modeling to anticipate future trends,
Right.
make smarter choices. And AI is also going to be crucial for creating more personalized customer experiences
Okay.
because AI can give businesses deep insights into what customers want, what they need.
Right.
And ultimately, AI is going to drive a lot of innovation,
Right.
helping businesses create entirely new products and services.
Yeah. It sounds like companies that really embrace AI strategically are going to be the ones that thrive.
Absolutely. They're the ones
Yeah.
who are going to be ahead of the curve.
Now, shifting gears a little bit to some of the bigger societal impacts, one thing that you sent that I thought was really interesting was the transformation of the workforce.
Yeah.
This is something that a lot of people are, concerned about.
Rightfully so. It's a big question mark. As AI becomes more advanced, it's obviously going to change the types of jobs that are available,
Right.
the skills that people need. And the sources we have, they talk about this need for reskilling and upskilling programs.
Ugh.
Programs that teach people how to work effectively with AI,
Right,
how to collaborate, how to leverage its strengths. We're also going to see a greater emphasis on those uniquely human skills.
right,
Things like creativity,
right,
complex problem solving,
right,
interpersonal communication, those things that AI can't replicate.
right.
And there are going to be whole new job categories that emerge,
Mm.
around managing and maintaining AI systems.
Right.
And our education systems, they're going to need to adapt to prepare future generations for this new reality.
So it's not necessarily about jobs disappearing, it's more about the skills that are going to be valued.
Right. It's a shift.
Yeah, and how we approach work. Now, the sources also talk about the digital divide and
Yes.
making sure that everyone has access to the benefits of AI.
That's a critical point.
Yeah.
As AI becomes more powerful, more integrated into our lives, we have to make sure that it doesn't just benefit a select few.
Right.
We need initiatives that extend the benefits of AI to everyone, regardless of their background, their income, their location.
Right.
And we need to develop AI tools that are user-friendly,
Right.
accessible to people who aren't tech experts.
Mm.
And we need educational resources to help everyone understand AI.
So it's about making sure that AI benefits society as a whole.
Exactly. It's about equity and inclusion.
And it doesn't make existing inequalities worse.
Absolutely. We have to be very mindful of that.
So for our listeners who are, trying to make sense of all of this,
Yeah.
what are some practical things they can do, some first steps they can take to really navigate this AI-driven future?
Well, the sources really emphasize the importance of just building your own understanding of AI. You don't have to become a programmer,
Right.
but you should have a grasp of what AI can do,
Right.
what it can't do.
Right.
You should be able to recognize AI-generated content
Right.
and assess whether it's reliable or not.
Right.
And you should know how to use those generative AI tools effectively.
Okay.
How to give them prompts, how to get what you need from them.
Right.
And just as important, you need to know when to trust your own judgment,
Right.
when human critical thinking is still essential.
Absolutely, yeah.
You
So
know?
basically become an informed user.
Exactly. Be smart about it.
Hmm.
Don't just blindly trust everything AI throws at you.
Now, what about using these tools responsibly?
Yeah, that's really important. So responsible use means things like double-checking information that AI gives you.
Okay.
Don't just take it at face value. Look for other sources.
Right.
And remember that AI systems can be biased. They reflect the data they were trained on.
Right.
So be aware of that. And use AI to enhance your own critical thinking, not to replace it.
Right.
And if you're using AI in a professional or academic setting,
Right.
be transparent about it.
Right.
Let people know how you're using it.
Right. So for someone who's just starting to explore AI, what are some concrete first steps they can take?
Well, the sources suggest experimenting. There are tons of AI tools out there that you can use for everyday tasks.
Right.
You might be surprised how many you're already using without even realizing it.
Right.
And stay informed. Follow reputable news sources that cover AI.
Okay.
That way you can keep up with the latest developments without getting overwhelmed.
Right.
And engage in the conversation.
Right.
Join online communities.
Right.
Follow experts on social media.
Okay.
And if you want to go deeper,
Yeah.
there are tons of online courses that can give you a good foundation in AI concepts.
So get some hands-on experience, stay informed, and be part of the conversation. Yeah.
Exactly. Jump in, the water's fine.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive into the next 5 years of AI.
Yeah, it's been fun.
We've covered a lot of ground
We have.
and really explored how AI is going to become even more capable, more integrated into our lives,
Yeah,
and more present in everything we do.
it's going to be everywhere.
And it brings with it some incredible opportunities.
It does, especially in areas like healthcare and education and business.
Right.
I mean, we've talked about how AI can help us diagnose diseases earlier,
Yeah.
personalize treatment plans,
Right.
develop new drugs faster,
Right.
make education more effective and engaging,
Yeah.
transform how businesses operate.
Right.
The potential is huge.
But we've also talked about the importance of being thoughtful,
Yes.
about adopting and using AI in a balanced way,
Right.
about continually learning and critically evaluating,
Absolutely.
both for individuals and for society as a whole.
We have to be smart about this.
Yeah.
We have to guide this technology in the right direction.
So the next few years are going to be really interesting. They're going to be really important in shaping the future of AI.
They're going to be pivotal.
So on that note, here's a final thought for you, our listeners. As AI becomes more and more powerful,
Yeah,
how are you going to adapt?
right.
How are you going to learn new skills?
Yeah.
How are you going to stay ahead of the curve?
How are you going to thrive in a world where you're collaborating with AI every day?
And what questions are you going to ask about the AI tools you encounter?
Right.
To make sure that you're using them responsibly, that
Yeah.
you're making informed decisions
It's about taking control, not being passive.
in this rapidly changing technological landscape. So think about that. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. See you next time.